this is Mark from Altcoin Buzz. Thanks for joining me today. I'm excited. We're going to do an in-depth look at Bitcoin. We've been hovering and consolidating here for a few days now. Where is it going? What are the indicators telling us? How does the chart look overall? What direction potentially be looking at for Bitcoin? I'm going to show you some of the indicators and go into a little bit more in depth about those, more than I normally would, so that you can get an idea of what kind of indicators I'm using to tell the picture or get the story and frame my thinking, so that when we look at these coins together and I say, hey, the indicator's looking really good on this coin, you understand what I'm looking at and how that story comes together. So let's get started on Bitcoin.
Okay, so let's step way back. Okay, we're going to step way back tonight, and we're looking at a couple things here. Let's look at the overall trend on Bitcoin. Okay, if we use this as support right now on our trend line, close to a test there, support back here, or that we bounced off of, and then back here. This is July, not even a year ago, right? Overall, this trend line is up. Yes, we had this big spike here, and if you missed that right up or bought in here, and now you're down here, you're not feeling too good about it. But if you've been in this for a little bit, less than a year, right, back here, you're still on a good trend. Bitcoin overall is on a good trend. Now, if you were lucky enough to be back in here in July and rode it all the way to the top, you would have made somewhere, your investment would have increased somewhere around that 850% range, right? Very nice. Now you were in a coma and you just woke up today, but again, you were back in July, and your price action today, you'd still have made 350% over your initial investment, right? So overall, if you just got involved and you got involved back here and back here, feel good about the fact that we are on an overall upward momentum still. And even if you did get involved just right in here somewhere, that's 30% increase, right? So, I mean, we've got to keep things in perspective a little bit. Bitcoin on a bubble, oh my gosh, it's bursting. It's going to go off a cliff. It's like the .com situation. Well, no, we're still on an upward trend. We've broken out of that because if we take this, and go against the highs, we've intersected there. And so now the way I'm looking at this chart, we're on the first leg of a new wave. Okay, so I'll pull those trend lines out. I just want to give you a little perspective because sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day action of all the kind of noise that can happen on an hour chart or a 4-hour chart or anything like that. So perspective-wise, from a daily chart, Bitcoin, you can see, is a strong coin, right? Still has good momentum. So when I say I'm looking at the indicators and they look good, things look relatively strong for this coin right now, or they're in a bullish mode, let me show you some of the things I'm looking at to make that evaluation, because you've asked, right? So we're going to do a little bit more in depth, like I talked about before. We're going to do a little bit more in depth on Bitcoin than we normally would. So one of the things that I'm going to look at is I want to see, and I like working off of an 8-hour chart. So that way I can break up the day into 3 parts, and I can come and look at the chart maybe a couple times during the day to see if anything major might be happening. And then one of those 8-hour periods, I'm asleep, right? So I have a couple opportunities to make some decisions if I want to on whether we've hit a swing and I want to get in or out. But it's not really something reacting to on an 8-hour chart day to day, in and out, day on. I'm not doing any day trading. So one of the things I want to look at is I'm going to go to my indicators now, and you can see quite a few. I want to have as much information in front of me because if I'm thinking something, I want to have 2 or 3 of these along with some other things that I'm going to look at, confirm my thinking. When we're evaluating the charts, we're looking for patterns. We're using this kind of data analysis for us that sets up things visually to help us with our interpretation of the chart. And I could read these indicators or use them differently than you would. The thing about this is it's a lot of theory that seems to hold true most of the time, right? So that's why we even do this, to give, at least for me, give me some comfortability with, when we get to this situation, was Bitcoin a bubble, and now this is just going to continue to go off a cliff? So one of the things we have set up here is this indicator. We've talked about it before, but I'll go back into it again. The directional moving index. And so this is giving me an idea of what kind of momentum is going on. And Is it more positive or is it more negative? These are the bulls. These are the bears. Who's in control over this chart right now? And you can see no one's really in control. We're in a consolidation period, so kind of fighting over it. But if we can look at candles and get an interpretation or make an interpretation on who's kind of winning that battle. For the most part, it's a struggle. You can see that they kissed right here. That was a true flip of the coin, like who's going to take this over, relatively, speaking. Now we'll go down to the next one, the relative strength index down here, which is giving us short and medium term momentum. What kind of momentum is going on in this price action right now? And as long as we're above kind of the 50%, the mid-range, we're in a bull zone. Okay, we're in a positive zone. When we're below that, we're trading below that, we're in a negative zone. So right now, Bitcoin is still in that bull zone. I'm looking for this mid-level right now where we're at to become support for a little bit more of a push. And I'll tell you, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And the third tool that I'm using right now, and these are my three, kind of my three basics right here at the bottom of the chart, is a MACD setup, which is a moving average convergence and divergence indicator or oscillator, which basically gives us an idea of using some moving averages, and I'll show you some of that in a minute. Is our energy more to the positive side or is it more to the negative side? And you can see we're starting to lose a little bit of that energy. Once we get very tight in here, you can see once we get very tight in here and it crosses over, that's what happens to our price action, right? We were coming up here, and as it crossed over, that's when our cycle started going down. As we tighten up in here and cross over, the way I'm reading the chart right now is going to be the end of this first wave, and then we'll do some correction, some retraction a little bit before we go into another wave that'll be nice and strong. All that being said, we also want to just get an idea of where our volume sits, right? Because you can see when you get these time periods where you've got a lot of volume against it, it really confirms some momentum or gains momentum from that volume. And we just don't have that here. So while our price action, our chart, our line is to the uptrend, it's not a strong uptrend, okay? Because we just don't have any volume behind it. Now, another thing that I want to look at is I'm going to look at the moving averages. And these are exponential moving averages. What that means is this is on an 8-hour chart. And this first one that I just drew in here, this green line, I'll zoom in on it for you. Let's zoom in on the recent kind of price action that we've had. So you can see this green line is really following this price action closely, right? And that's because it's a short-term, fast moving average. It's set up to average 8 candles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's averaging them out and plotting that on this line. As we add a candle, it'll factor in the new candle and drop off the last one in the average, and it'll plot it on the line. And so this average keeps moving based upon how those last 8 candles are averaging out. And on this particular moving average, it's factoring in the most recent price action heavier than the back end of this average, the last 8 candles. The most recent price action has more weight to it than what happened at the back end. Now that's, 8 days, or 8 candles, it's very fast. It's not, taking into account a lot of information. Then I've got a 13, and that's in blue, a little slower, and that's averaging in 13 candles. I'll add the 21, which is really kind of my mid-range, and that'll factor in 21 candles now. And you can see how the spacing gets different, right? And then 55, which is my slow moving average in the red, and that's taking into account 55 candles. You can see back here where all of those moving averages started to cross over. Certainly the short-term ones and the medium-term one, the 8, the 13, and the 21, all crossed over, which starts to indicate very positive momentum. And then once it crosses over the slower moving average, the one that we're using is the 55, then it's confirmed we're in an uptrend. Now, when we looked at the MACD, it shows that we're starting to slow down there. We could be coming to the end of this first leg of this cycle as these moving averages start to cross over. And you can see they did here, but now they're coming back into an uptrend. That leads me to believe we still have some more energy to go, barring a day where we have a whole lot of negative volume if it came into the market. Just like back here, I'm sorry, not there. Just like back here where we had some strong positive momentum, right, that pushed us up to this resistance level at the $9,700 mark. If we got that kind of positive volume, we could see retesting that again. If we got a bunch of negative volume against it like we did in here, then these moving averages were so tight that those would start crossing over, and we'd be confirmed once they all crossed over, in my mind. We'd look at some other things, but in general, we'd be confirmed that we're on a downtrend and we're going to start retracing for a little bit before we hit another cycle up. Hopefully that makes sense for you. So another thing that we can look at, or that I do look at, is what are called Bollinger Bands, and that is a way of visually representing kind of where our resistance is at, again on a moving average at the top level, and where our resistance or support is at on a lower level on a moving average. And that gives us a range here. We've got a midline averages these two things out, sitting in the middle. Again, as we're above that midline, we are in more of a positive momentum. And theoretically, these top lines become our resistance levels. So you can see where we bounced off of it in here. And we still have positive momentum here. We're above this center point. We crossed over it here, and that became our support. We're kind of testing it again right in here. So potentially that could become resistance, and we bounce back off and down in here. And then that would really start consolidating this area, potentially move our moving averages over and have those cross to the downtrend and bring our MACD that we were looking at back here to more of the midpoint and have us start crossing over into a down cycle. I think we have a little bit more energy to this last wave. I don't think it's quite finished yet. I'd love to see us gain support in this RSI and at least get back up into this level before we drop back down, because that could potentially, again, take us into, let me just turn this off, into our resistance area that we saw before. So let's just do that again. Draw some horizontal support and resistance lines. So our resistance is right in this area, that 95 range. Our support right now horizontally is right in this area at about 8,800. If we can continue to get that momentum, that last little push out of here, we probably will test this resistance level again, maybe even as high as where we got to the swing high here of 9,700. Do we break through there? I'm thinking that we're going to probably test this area again, but I do want to see what price action happens up here in the $9,700 range. If we test that area again and it acts as resistance again, and our MACD confirms a crossover back here, and we've lost support on the RSI, and theoretically our directional moving index moves to more of a bearish position. See, then I can add all those things up and say, okay, I think we've ended our first leg of this wave now. We're into a retraction phase, and we'll see some negative action down before we make another strong run back up. So that's how I pull all the elements together to try and give me a picture. I mean, there's another thing we can look at too. Just if we said, do we have a little more life in this action? We can look at kind of how this overall wave, this mini wave, is looking. If this is our resistance level right now, and our support comes in here, you can see if we looked at this like an arrow, it's pointing up, right? So all of those things together say, to me, we've got a little more room to move here, but I don't see a ton of energy against it. So I don't know that we're going to break through this resistance on this next run. I'll watch it, but I won't be surprised if we bump our head off of this and start seeing all the other stuff come into more of a bearish outlook. Again, just to reset this zone and to be able to come into another big, strong push. Also, follow us on Twitter at AltcoinBuzzIO. Follow us on Instagram at AltcoinBuzz. You can follow us on Telegram and Discord. We've got a brand new podcast that you can find. Subscribe and hit that alarm button so that when content gets posted, you're notified right away.